You are welcome to the African Leadership Conversation, where we bring you relevant information about leadership on the continent. Our core mandate here is to bring you the answers to the hows, the whys, the whats, and the whens of leadership in Africa. The burgeoning population of Africa is intrinsically tied to the influential roles played by the various religions across the continent. This demographic expansion presents an opportunity to gain invaluable leadership lessons. The interplay between the increasing populace and the various diverse religious landscape offers an instructive lens through which we can discern the significance of effective governance and the need for leaders to embrace a holistic understanding of the region's dynamics. So whether it's a pastor delivering a sermon on a Sunday morning, or an imam leading Friday prayers, or any other religious leader, their influence definitely goes beyond the confines of their place of worship. So today's topic is a very interesting one that a guest of mine has said is uniquely challenging, and then the other said that such a topic evokes fresh perspective. So our topic today is leadership lessons from the pulpit, and I have two young men here with me to help me navigate this topic. So I have Phinehas and then Sylvester. Phinehas, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Diana.
And then Sylvester, you're also welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here again.
Yes, it's good to have you here. So, Phinehas, how was your morning trying to get here? I know you live at Kasua, a very beautiful city.
Yeah, it's very beautiful, no matter what I think. It was quite calm getting here. Not too challenging. Yeah, not too challenging, I'd say.
Okay, and then Sly,
I think Phinehas is just trying to be a bit modest with the Casper situation. Today was crazy. I also stay around.
Yes.
And there was terrible traffic.
It was as though it was planned to bring two people who live at Kasua.
Sitting, in the public transport and the Scottish sand and everything just makes you more infuriated about why the leaders are not
facing the traffic out. That's why I didn't want to talk about
it. Why the leaders, and I'm sure people are always reminded about leadership whenever they are faced with some of these challenges. Immediately there's traffic, you are like, okay, so who is supposed to make sure the traffic flows, right? But yeah, it's a good morning here and good to be here. We're finally here, so.
Yeah.
Okay. So moving away from the traffic situation and the Kasua hula balloon, who is Phinehas? Well, Phinehas is a research analyst. He's also a faith leader, and then he's the president for the faith sector here at the Grace Life Leadership Center. He's also the host for Faith and Reason. And then Sylvester is a consultant, Africa-China Affairs, and then he's the president for the education sector here at the Grace Life Leadership Center. I'll start with you, Phinehas.
Sure.
What do you think about the role of the pulpit, the significance of the pulpit when it comes to leadership? And then what are some of the expectations and responsibilities that come with it?
Thank you very much for that question. I must start by saying that humans have been found to be inherently religious. Whenever archaeologists have gone on their excavations, they have always, without fail, found pointers to religion among every people group. So humans have always been religious. What skeptics of religion in general always thought was that once we begin to explain certain phenomena from a scientific point of view, then there would be no need for religion. What we have found, though, is the contrary, that a lot more people are turning to the supernatural to make meaning out of life. So people are generally religious. In our part of the world, in Africa, whether it's, the two major religions of the world, Christianity or Islam, you find that a lot more people are embracing this. The projections for the future for these faiths is that Africa is going to play a huge role.
Yes,
in that.
I saw that too.
Yes, so religion is not going to go anywhere. Now, when you look at the Christian faith itself, when it started, people described the Christian faith as the Christians, as people who had turned the world upside down. And there was context to that, but it still applies even today, that Christians have turned the world upside down. And why do I say that? Anyone who lives in the West today, and I'm phrasing it this way, anyone who lives in the West today is influenced by Christianity. And I say that way to mean that everyone in the world is influenced by Christianity, because everyone in the world has been impacted by the West. Everyone in the world has been impacted by the West, especially because of globalization. Maybe if not for globalization, we could have limited it to Europe and the Americas. But because of globalization, everyone is copying from the West. And so in some way, you have been impacted by the West. And since the West was influenced by Christianity, you have been influenced by Christianity. Christianity gave us our existing concept of human rights. It has given us our existing concept of justice. It has given us our existing concept of what heterosexual monogamous marriage is. It has given us our existing concept of a right to private property and all of that. So the reason why it said that human beings should have rights is because Christianity insisted that no matter who a human being is, he has inherent worth. He was created by a God who said that he deserves to be here. So whether you're a monarch or you're a president, you need to respect that person who is at the bottom of the ladder. It was countercultural before Christianity came. So Christianity has done all that. Today, what we see is that people are trying to partition their faith from their public lives or their practical lives, so that what they do in a church, if they are Christians, or in the mosque, if they are Muslims, should not be seen in their public lives when they are in the office on a Wednesday morning. Because it's supposed to be something private. That's how they see it. That's how they rationalize it.
Between me and my God.
It's between you and your God. What you do in your private corner, don't bring it into the public square. But the people who started these faiths, and forgive me if you're watching us and you are of another faith apart from the two major faiths. I'm focusing on the two major faiths because of their influence around the world. The people who started Christianity, the people who propagated Christianity, the people who propagated Islam, were not going to keep it private. They insisted that it should be seen publicly. Now, for Christianity, how does it look like when you are supposed to live it out publicly? It means that you are supposed to take your understanding of who you are now as a Christian, basically what your pastor tells you from the pulpit, tells you about who you are now, having been, redeemed. There are lots of buzzwords that Christians use. Now, you're supposed to take that into your public square and say that, how would a redeemed person live this way? How would somebody who is supposed to embody honesty live this way? How would somebody who's supposed to be worshiping a God who values integrity live this way? And those are the things. So the Christian was taught that his life was not left to the whim of the gods, because that's how people usually thought. If you were a slave, you were stuck at being a slave. Your children would grow up and be slaves. Your descendants would be slaves. Christianity came and said, no. The God who raised his son from the dead can empower you and bless the work of your hands. So put your mind to it and work. One day, even if you're a slave, your son can become one of the elites. It was countercultural. So people were taught that they could they could be leaders of their own lives. They could take their destiny into their hands and ask the God who watches over everything to just bless the work of their hands. That was how leadership began to seep into society. People began to see themselves as, life doesn't just happen to me. I can actually do something. And that was revolutionary. So from there, you realize that people could say, Christianity has turned the world upside down, and it is showing people that they have a lot of intrinsic worth. There's a lot that the pulpit, played in bringing us to this understanding of making people know that they can take charge of life and bring change in society.
Sly.
First of all, I must say that I want to commend Phinehas's work, especially at the Faith and Reason project that he has online.
You'll be given time to talk about it.
Because these are some of the topics that will come up on his show, right? And having said that, I think he just gave us a very good introduction of this whole concept of leadership and Christianity and all of that. So in fact, Africa, like you said, is actually very religious, right? Probably the most religious continent in the world.
Yeah.
And that actually should mean a lot, right? In terms of people expect a lot, So the church or the mosque or whatever, religious faith is actually expected to lead the world. Now, if Africa is the most religious, then it means that the religious people are supposed to have the most influence, right? In terms of numbers, right? So that if we take, let's say, the Ministry of Education, and if Ghana is Christian dominated, we should have more Christians in the Ministry of Education than Muslims or Buddhists. And even if we have more Muslims or Buddhists, it doesn't change because that is the religion at work here, right? So there is an expectation of the pulpits in terms of how society evolves. Because if they are more, then they should know best, right? So I want to just say that, just to add to what he's saying, there are indeed expectations of the pulpits, and in fact, it's increasingly becoming very clear. Where you go on social media and people are saying that we expect the church to do this, we expect the church to do that. In fact, I think the expectation started from the time, and this is probably controversial, where people say that we were not introduced to Christianity, But then, from our colonial times, when the West, the colonialists came down, they also introduced schools, right? That's why we have missionary schools and all of that. So I'm sure that the expectations of the pulpits, started right from there, where people said, okay, if we have, I went to St. Charles Minor Seminary, which is a Catholic school. We have, Baptist schools. We have different type of missionary schools, right? That is the church rightly playing a role of education right there, right? So apart from education, people are expecting the church to lead in so many aspects of society, even including contributing to, hospitals and even the recent flooding issue. People are expecting that the church should play a role in helping to salvage the situation, right? So I want to just say that indeed there is an expectation of the pulpit to lead the way, to make the world a better place, because the religious people have professed that they've seen the light. They have a supernatural being who is able to do a lot of things through them and with them, right? So there is an expectation right from there.
All right, that's great. And to add to what you said, when the missionaries came, a lot of them too came with drugs. So aside setting up schools,
medicine,
they also came with medicines, and then even helped to build some facilities around. In terms of putting out different housing structures, as we can glean from some of the books we've read and then the documentaries we've watched. So we are still talking about the topic leadership lessons that we can draw from the pulpit. So, gentlemen, I want to know, I'm sure the others too outside here too would want to know. We've come to understand that the pulpit has a lot of influence and impact. So how can we see religious leaders influence or impact their congregations' belief, values, and even choices, if I would say, having established that they carry a lot of influence?
Really interesting question. What's the role of the pulpit, the church or the mosque in all of that? So the church or the mosque is regarded as mostly the embassies of heaven, right? Where this is where we're supposed to seek help from in transitioning to the other world, right? But apart from that, the world, the current world, the physical world, is expecting a lot from the church, like I mentioned earlier, I established earlier. So what's the role of the church in helping with these leadership traits? Personally, I don't know whether we've lost the opportunity or we're about to lose it. But personally, I think that...
So it's like we want to know their role and how they influence their congregation.
Right, exactly. I believe that if we are to get a turnaround in how leadership is implemented in Africa, then the religious part of it is our best bet. Yeah. If we are to see good leadership, then the church or the mosque could have. So I don't know whether I should use the word could have or should, because things are not working, and I don't know whether we've missed it already, or if we play our cards where we will see things improve. The point I'm trying to make is that the church, is our best bet to turn things around.
Okay.
Because of the amount of influence they have on the people. So how can they influence a generation of leaders or people who will lead well? Now, the human being is a sum total of their beliefs, faith, principles, cultures, worldview, and everything. If you take a human being, that is what they're made of.
Yes.
Good. Now, how do they get this type of values? Where do they get the values from? For instance, if I ask you, where do you have the value of integrity? Where did you get it from? I'm sure that we will have a percentage of it coming from the Bible, because the Bible is big on integrity, on truthfulness, and all of that.
Especially considering that I'm a Christian.
Exactly, considering that you are a Christian. Right. So if the human being is a sum total of their beliefs, their values, their ideals, and all of that, and the church, so excuse me if I'm using the church a lot, because that is the faith I identify with. I'm a Christian, right? And it happens to the mosque and all of that. Then it means that majority of my values, and if I hold the God as supreme being, majority of my values should be drawn from the Bible, right? So the church has that power to influence values of people. So I'm just going to use one value of integrity, which we all believe is lacking in our political leadership. Integrity, selflessness. At TGLC, we are very big on selfless leaders, service to the people, right? The Bible is very clear on the fact that a leader should be a servant of the people. Yes. I think in the book of Matthew, right? The Quran is also actually very clear on the value or the ideal of integrity or service, because I think the Prophet Muhammad is actually quoted to have said that the leader of the people is the servant of the people.
Interesting.
I'm just trying to measure on one value that the church or religion can impact on the people. So the church has that responsibility to give us the values that we have, apart from our immediate families. In fact, even there are homes that when the child is 1 year, they start going to church. So right from there, the church begins to socialize the human being. So that is one of the critical roles that I think the pulpit has in helping the society, trying to imbue in them the values and the ideals that they need for life. And it's very interesting that we don't see majority of these pulpit values being shown outside. Phinehas made a point that people, from the early stages were trying to, separate their faith from their public life, which is an error. It's supposed to move hand in hand.
Exactly.
So that, the last point I'm making on that, so that if we can have more Christians, more Muslims implementing or going by the values that their faith teaches, especially bringing it into leadership, then we can have a good time in Africa.
All right. Okay, so Phinehas, you have a show, Faith and Reasoning, and I believe you've been influencing young people or others who are interested in that kind of discussion. So tell us, how do they do it, the religious leaders? How do they exert their influence on their congregation?
I must start by saying that we need to be fair to the religious leaders. We need to be fair and put our demands in perspective.
Right.
I'm not aware of the hours that how do I put this? The hours that are needed or that usually take place for a Muslim regarding going to the mosque every week. I don't know how many hours they spend in the mosque, but for a Christian, the average Christian probably spends about, let me be liberal and say 3 hours on a Sunday.
Okay.
And then if he goes for midweek services, he's probably spending maybe another 3 hours in the week. So that's 6 hours in 7 days.
Yes, and for some faith like the SDAs, there's whole of Saturdays dedicated for that.
Okay. Yeah, so I think that'll be a good place for me to use. So let's use the SDA. That uses the whole Saturday. So that's like 24 hours.
Yes.
But still compare 24 hours to the whole week. That's still like a very small fraction. They go out there, and especially in our current day, they are exposed to different ideologies for 6 days. And then for 24 hours, the church has to either do remediation or try to be proactive in pushing an ideology into the people.
Okay.
So you realize that it's actually, there's kind of a disproportion where the church, in regarding the church actually doing a lot of the pushing. That's, the church has done so much pushing, should be seen as credit. Because, yes, it's true, the person is going to church all their lives, but compared to what he's exposed to at school, if he's a kid, what he's exposed to, on social media, if he has a phone and has internet in the community, you realize that the church has very little time. So the pastor has just Sunday to teach the person, this is how you're a father. This is how to be a responsible father. He's telling young men, this is how you should behave as Christians. Don't give in to your whims just like the world would do. It's very few hours. But look at, when you put things in perspective, the church has been so influential, so pivotal. In West Africa, in Sub-Saharan Africa especially, the church played such a crucial role in the fight that the governments of Sub-Saharan Africa wanted to fight against the spread of HIV and AIDS. Because on a Sunday morning, where are you going to find most people? You're going to find them in churches.
Yes.
On Fridays, you're going to find them in their mosques. So what these civic education societies would do is they would have to go and liaise with the churches. Please, let's speak to you. Let's speak to your people, because we have gotten a cross-section of society gathered here today.
Yes.
When they go out there, if he's a mechanic, he goes back to the shop and he can tell his friends about, this is what they taught us at church today. They said the next time we should use a condom. They said that this, like, it was pushing the spread of HIV/AIDS back.
Which reminds me, when I was a child, a lot of the health education talks, surprisingly, I had them in church.
Right.
Surprisingly, yes, I had it in church.
Exactly. So the church was uniquely placed to do all of that. When it came to deciding the outcome of key elections and ensuring that people would not follow their emotions into civil war. In Ghana, I remember when we were leading up to the 2000 elections and how everyone was afraid and churches were praying against war and telling people whatever the outcome, let us do this. A lot of people say Ghana has a lot of Famanyame syndrome, but trust me, it has held a lot of people back from spilling over into, societal decay. That's another place where the church is showing forth a lot of leadership. I have seen people laugh at the fact that, billionaires don't teach people their tricks, but churches are like, come and let's teach you how to make wealth. And, when I hear skeptics say that, I tend to like to defend that, and I'm like, yeah, true. Bill Gates is not going to teach me how he makes his wealth, but somebody must teach me how to make wealth.
Right.
So the pastor teaches me how to save some of my money.
Right.
The pastor plays a lot of roles in society. He's a finance expert. He's a marriage coach. He's, he does so much, and yet he probably doesn't have certification. But who should the people go to?
Right.
They don't have the means to go and see maybe a trained expert, someone who went to Harvard, but they can go to their pastor and tell their pastor, this is the situation I'm facing in my marriage. And the pastor has to some way, somehow show forth, okay, this is how you act as a man. You don't have to hit her when she's talking. You have to do this. And he's showing for leadership. Those are the various ways. People would say young kids go to university, and instead of them to focus on their books, they are following churches and they are doing this. And people are like, where did I learn public speaking from? I learned it at church.
Yes.
I go to church and they tell me, you go and give us an exhortation.
Yes.
And it's impromptu and I have to do it. And I was learning to speak before 50 people and it became 60 people. Now I can speak before 2,000 people. I was taught how to plan events because they'll put me on committees.
Exactly.
The church is doing all of that and people are not realizing it. So it is there. I think where people want to see a lot more probably relates with accountability.
Right.
That the church should be able to say that, well, we have taught you and you have placed yourself in a position, you are in a corridor of power.
Yeah.
Now, we don't just want to celebrate when you come with a Range Rover and come with a Land Rover and come and give testimonies. We want you to be able to show us how you, in honesty, got this car.
Right.
How you, in honesty, reached this place. We want the church to be able to say, yes, we serve a God who is merciful, but we also serve a God who is just. So where there is leadership abuse, we don't just want to forgive or push things under the carpet. We want to be able to see that you are letting the right legal requirements take place.
Yes.
I think that is where people want to see. And yet, while we need to call a spade and say that the church hasn't exactly done so well in that regard, but we still need to give the church credit for a lot of the other aspects of leadership that the church has, shown for. So they might not do it every Sunday saying 5 ways to be a better mother.
Okay.
But over time, you would realize that the young women are beginning to set themselves apart.
Yes.
They are acting in a different way. You can tell there's something different about this one. In most cases, you can tell there's something different. And that's how the church is showing the leadership in society.
Yeah, Dean, let me just add quickly before we go to the next question. So indeed, we've all established that there's a huge role that the church plays in a lot of society, right? Raising leaders, in a very in a way that people don't see. It's not clear, right?
Yes.
In fact, in the church, in the modern day church, people are picking up roles that are very relevant to public service.
Yes.
So you go to the church, apart from the resident pastor, they have an assistant, they have an administrator, they have a finance person.
Yeah.
In fact, some churches have a security officer. Some have all of that. That is actually a reflection of what we need in society happening right in the church.
Yes.
So I think the point Phinehas made that what is lacking right now is accountability. It's true. Where it looks like the church is doing all it can, with the limited time it has to imbibe in these people the type of leadership values and ideals that they need. And then, after that, we don't see accountability, right? So, like I said earlier, if majority of the people in political, government leadership right now are Christians, then we demand accountability from whatever the church has taught them or from whatever the mosque has taught them.
Yeah.
Right on it. Right on. Exactly well put. So we've looked at how the church exerts its influence on the congregation and a lot of revelations. I was thoroughly impressed. Now, moving away from that, can we look at how the church or the pulpit has been able to speak out when it comes to issues around social justice, look at poverty, inequality? What are some of the ways by which the church has taken the lead?
I think this is very clear, actually, even if we don't say anything. History speaks volumes.
Yeah.
From Martin Luther King to Mahatma Gandhi to Nelson Mandela. I don't know about Nkrumah. But these 3 people are mentioned. History has it that their actions, their leadership roles were hugely influenced by religion.
Okay.
So take Buddhism, Mahatma Gandhi. He led societal change in a way that was nonviolent because he held that concept of nonviolence. And I think that is drawn directly from Buddhism. Right. Okay. He tried so much to be very accountable to the people because in Buddhist principles, a political leader is actually supposed to be held to a very high, level of integrity.
Okay.
Take the US. I mean, I just mentioned his name. Martin Luther King. Okay. Martin Luther King said that, look, we need to push for equality and human rights for the black people, but in a non-violent way.
Okay.
Right. This is also drawn from Christianity, right? Where the Bible teaches us to be very patient with people, not to be rough with them, to be gentle, and all of that, right? I believe strongly also Nelson Mandela led the apartheid, revolution, also, drawing from Christian values and all of that. That is what has happened in history,
Yes.
right? So again, people are expecting that the modern day church will still play a role in fighting for some of these social concepts and all of that. And it is happening, actually. I think the church is doing well. And that is why we have a Christian council, right? In Ghana, we have this Christian council thing, where when there's an issue, people are like, where is the Christian council? Where is the Christian council? What is the Christian council talking about it? I remember in the Madame Cecilia Adapa issue, the 1 million saga, people are like, the Christian council is quiet about it. We want them to talk about it, right? So these are the expectations. And I believe that the church has a role to play more, to do more in terms of fighting for some of these social issues. And it is happening, right? We saw recently the Alpha Hour man, donate to Kolebu. These are all ways the church is contributing. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure in the recent Mepe flooding, I'm sure the church has also, come up. Yeah. So clearly, the church has and continues to. However, we need to see more. And how are we going to do that? I think the leaders of the various faiths must come to the strong realization that more than ever, society is requiring or expecting them to do more. And I think that the people must also demand more from the church or the mosque. I don't know how, probably we could talk about it, but increasingly, society is expecting that the church will play a role in shifting some of these issues, in making things right. So I think the church has done it, and they are doing it, and they will continue to do it. But we need more to be done.
like Oliver Twist, asking for more.
Definitely. For me, I think it comes down to a matter of ethics, as in how exactly these values are played out. Mm-hmm. Because imagine you lived in Germany in the 1940s, maybe 1940. Okay. And you lead, maybe you're not a pastor, but you lead a small fellowship and in a small town, and you keep warning them about this rising political leader that you don't feel very good about him. There's a funny feeling you get the way he's propagating his ideals, and that people should be careful. And of course, it's a small group that you have. You can't speak to the whole nation. Okay. The nation goes ahead and votes him into power, and he comes in and he starts killing Jews. So you start telling people you were right. You want people, and now you start telling people don't give in to his demands. Okay. When he tells you to bring Jews, don't bring the Jews, hide the Jews, and all of that. And then a group of people walk up to you and say, Pastor, we want to go and kill this man. What are you going to say to them? Now, your religion values human life.
Yes.
Right. But here is someone who is killing people. How are you going to fight that racism, that classism?
Right.
Are you going to say, well, let's take him out? Or are you going to say, let's use more diplomatic means?
Thank God I didn't have to answer that.
So it actually happened, and a pastor, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, actually took a gun and decided he was going to kill Hitler. Of course, the plan failed and he was killed. But it is a very lively debate in theological circles about what to do, what the church can do in some of these instances. How does the church fight for vulnerable people? Does the church decide that they will take out some of these people? Or does the church say that, let us wait it out? Now, how did people decide to fight against the slave trade? Yes. Because the slave trade was stopped by Christians. It's true, people will tell you that people use the Bible to propagate slavery. But people forget that it was actually people who also used the Bible to say, no, slavery is wrong, and we don't have to subject other human beings to this. So the church has done that. Now, in Rwanda, after the war,
The genocide.
When they set up their reconciliation commission, they ensured that there were religious leaders on there.
Okay.
In Ghana, when we moved over to our second president of the Fourth Republic, when he set up a reconciliation commission, there were religious leaders over
Actually,
there.
Nelson Mandela
did the same thing. No reconciliation commission seems to exempt religious leaders. Every one of them seems to know that you need religious leaders who know how to bring tempers down, who know how to get through to people and tell them, look, I know you are demanding blood. You actually have a great case, but why don't we demand justice this way? Why don't we push for justice for the marginalized this way? Why don't we ensure that the people who are vulnerable and cannot speak up have advocates through the church this way? And like Sly mentioned, our sheer numbers in Africa alone should be something we can use and in holding politicians to account. That look, we actually hold over 80% of the population.
Yes.
Now, if you do not do what we want, we are not giving you our vote.
Yes.
Now, the politician, all he wants is your vote.
Yes.
Now, if you can hold him to that and ensure that everyone has singularity of purpose, they begin to do everything you want. They would begin to ensure that systems are working so that the cobbler who has gone around hitting his box has enough to go and buy kenke in the afternoon. He is not someone who is ignored. Not all the resources are kept up, but it trickles down to him. The church plays a role in that. And he plays a role by, sometimes on the pulpit, but also by pushing pressure in the lobbies, lobbying and saying that, okay, this is our deal, and if you do not do this, we are not giving you our franchise.
So what do you say about this growing trend of foundations? Most churches now have foundations. Is that meant to solve those social issues?
I don't know. So charity in the Bible is something that we all know that is all over in the Bible. You need to be kind to the other person and all of that. So I will be surprised if we don't see more foundations actually spring up in the churches, because the Bible is very big on charity, giving alms, even the Quran and all of that. But I think that is one of the ways the church can play a role in helping to solve some of those societal challenges. Ima came recently. Ima is our founder here at TGS, came recently and was very pissed about the fact that there are a lot of street hawking. There are a lot of children, actually, not street hawking, but young people on the streets. And he's asking, whose rule is this? Where is the church? I actually read that on Ima's status. He said, where is the church? Right? Because it's directly linked to charity, because the politicians would have little to do, but the church will be generous enough to say that we are donating free of charge, to these people. So I think it's good that the church is doing that, and I hope we'll actually see more of that. However, I think there is a more strategic way the church can actually help with some of these things, apart from just setting up foundations, right? In terms of business, right? We want to see that people, members of the church, strategically helping to lift people out of poverty. I'm not saying they should be discriminatory in who they employ in their companies, but I think it should be more targeted. That the church is saying that, okay, this year we want to lift 500,000 people out of poverty.
Yes.
How do we do that? How many people have companies here? And the book of Acts, I think chapter 4 or something, will remain my best, verse in the Bible, where the Bible says that there was none among who was poor, because everyone sold their properties, brought it to the feet of the apostles and said, look, share it among other people, right? So is it possible for the church to be more strategic, more intentional in saying that, okay, this is a societal problem, how do we solve it? Apart from just the foundation, outside the scope of foundation. Is it possible for you guys to do more, employ more people and all of that? It's possible, right? So the foundation is good, But I think there is still more that strategically that they can do.
I want to push back on that, and say that a lot of us like to go to Acts, the book of Acts, and talk about that, but that really happened for just a very short period.
Okay, tell me more.
Yeah, because they had come around for the Passover to celebrate, and they were together. Now these people had come, and suddenly they had heard people speaking in their languages. They had become Christians, so they had stayed in Jerusalem. And because they didn't plan to live for so long, they decided to sell their belongings. The Christians who lived in Jerusalem sell their belongings and take care of everyone. So it wasn't like that was how the church was operating. It was just for probably at most 3 months.
But I'm sure it was influenced by their faith.
It was influenced by their faith. But the point is, it wasn't a mode of operation for the church. So you realize that at some place it was Paul who said that the one who does not work should not eat. It tells you that that was not their mode of operation.
That's contextual, right?
Yeah,
like
in context.
That was specific.
Yeah.
But if you and just allow us, let me clarify that as well. But if we say that, it also means that anything we see in the Bible, because there were contexts, there were specific moments that things happened.
Yes.
So should we say that because it was short-lived, we don't copy from that?
Exactly. My point is we can't copy that. It won't be very feasible.
Okay.
It won't be very feasible as a way of life for the church. Okay. It will be feasible for a very short period. If we were up north and then say there was a state of emergency and everyone had to stay somewhere, how do you think we would live? The way we would live in that state of emergency is not how we would live when the state of emergency is lifted. Exactly. That was what was going on. But would it be
good for us to imbibe that kind of way of life?
It might be good, but sometimes what is good is not feasible. So here's the thing. The reason why, and I had not thought of it until you mentioned it, that a lot of churches are putting out foundations. And I'm quickly thinking that's actually a good thing in the sense that now, I spoke about how churches are helping people become better fathers and everything. But if I came to a church and let's say for about 4 Sundays, every time I leave church, I'm like, this week I'm going to be a good businessman. This week I'm going to be a very good father. I'm going to be this. I probably won't go back to that church after a month.
Okay.
The reason is I'm not going to church to learn about business.
Right.
I'm not going to church to learn about being a father.
Okay.
I'm going to church to learn about Jesus. So I should leave church thinking this week I'm going to be a good Christian.
Right.
Okay. So that should be my primary thing. Every once in a while, when the pastor thinks he has to talk about this, he should talk about it and I should do that. But if it becomes a trend, then I think, okay, the church is actually taking what should be primary to the secondary and is majoring on the minor. So I think in light of that, churches are realizing, no, it's good that we help people. It's good that we do all of these social justice and advocacy, but that is not our primary goal. So why don't we set up a side of our church and ensure that that branch we set up people who, are creditable, people who are competent enough to administer in these foundations, and then they decide to administer that humanitarian arm of the church. Then we on the pulpit can say that we are going to focus on what we were called to do, which is to, open your Bibles and let me tell you who you are as a redeemed person. Of course, eventually it trickles into the foundation, because if you tell the person that because the standard of giving in the church is 100%, because the Bible says, greater love had no man than this, that he would give his life, then it means the standard for giving is to give your all, and you are supposed to walk in generosity. Then you should be able to say that, this is what I've gotten this month, and I'm going to, push some of what I've gotten into a foundation so that they can give to these people, so that we can build a school here, so that we can help people who need this. Then the church, the foundation says that we have realized that on our database, a lot of people are in this income class. We need to maybe start workshops and teach people how to do better. Maybe we have a lot of mates in our church, so let's give them a plan where in the next 5 years, they are still not going to be mates. By that time, they should become at least just drivers of one car, or they should have 2 cars. It's the foundation aspect of the church that does that, not the church itself, because the church itself should be teaching the mates how he should not steal, should be teaching him how he should, try to win his other colleague mates to become Christians, and all of that. So I think it's a very brilliant thing that churches are doing by setting up foundations.
Okay, so when this pillage thing happened, I went online, I read a lot, and there was someone who had called on people to donate a particular amount of money to support. And then there were other people in the comment section too who were calling out the churches that this church should do this, church should do this, or even like religious leaders that do this. So you can see that in times of crisis, I was shocked when I saw the first call was on the church and not to the government to act. So it got me thinking then, just like you said, there's an expectation for the church to do something. So when we are faced with crisis, how does the church come in? Because now we know the expectations are high. And also, do you think that call on the church can be attributed to the fact that maybe the church is in the position to do so because of, let's say, availability of resources?
Phinehas wants to do that.
You can go.
So let me also just be quick to add that the call on the church sometimes is not out of good intention. People are just trying to make mockery.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've actually read comments where people are like, the church is taking so much from the people. The church is not paying tax. What is the church doing about it? Because the government is taking tax and they have other responsibilities. So if the church is not... So I just want to say that indeed, people are expecting, but the expectations are varied. Some people are just being malicious and all of that. But nevertheless, I think either they call on the church or they don't. The church knows its role in all of these things out of all that Jesus has taught us to do, especially as Christians, right? So either they call on us or they don't call on us. I think there's a responsibility for us to step in and do some of these things. And like Phinehas said, that is why it's important to set up some of these branches of the church, like the foundation, to take care of some of these things. Humanitarian crisis will continue to happen,
yes,
in the world. So what we should be talking about is how the church will actually respond, not because people will call on it, but because we think that we have a responsibility to live as the light of the world, to bring the kingdom on earth, to help people and all of that. Issues will continue to happen. We'll continue to have floods. We might even have more pandemics happening and all of that. What do we do when it happens? The church will continue to play a role because it has done that and it will continue to do that. For me, it's a no-brainer. These are things that will continue to happen, right? And also, again, the church will just have to think that, look, especially in the context where the governments are not up to the task, I think it's becoming more and more important that the church will do more to help, because that's what it is, right? If the government played it through, probably the burden would have been less on the people. Because I know some pastors who are actually paying school fees of their church members just because their parents are not able to work and earn their worth, right? So there's a responsibility comes back to the church and to the pastors, right?
How about the issue of the resources?
Okay, good. So again, people think that the church has the resources,
yes,
actually. Especially from that perspective of no tax, tax on some of these things. Yes. The church takes tithes, the church takes that and all of that. So people in their minds actually think that the church is resourced to step in for some of these things. That is how majority of people think. But I know that the church is already doing a lot with the monies that they have, that they even need more because of some of the things they do. I know churches, in fact, so Resurrection Power New Generation is just by on the road, right? I know people who have talked about the fact that there's a lot of members in the church and they are paying a lot of tithe and all of that, offering. They have a school actually. They have the Resurrection Power Mission School, which is good, right? And you can only imagine the salaries they are paying to the teachers and the cleaners, the security people, and all of that. That is happening already from the resources, So I think that people believe the church is resourced. I don't know what the church thinks, but I believe that the church needs more. Actually, is doing more and needs more.
I think in reality, the church isn't as resourced as people think. From the outside. A lot of people, and maybe it's because of how a lot of, especially charismatic churches, have branded themselves,
Yes.
today, and it makes it look like, oh, there's a lot, but really the church is doing a lot with little.
Right.
Okay.
Now, I keep saying this, that when and I said, I think the last time I made this argument was when in our country they were pushing for the e-levy.
Okay.
And I was like, have they realized that church members always go back to give to their churches, like no matter what? That maybe these politicians should sit down and ask pastors, how do you get church members who do not work at the church to say
give.
that, okay, we are building a church,
Yeah.
we will bring our money, and every month they'll bring money. The truth is, when the church says we are building a church, 9 out of 10 times you would see the church, the building coming
Yeah.
up.
Okay.
So if they can see the evidence of my 5 CDs coming up next week or next month, next time you ask me for 10 CDs, I'll put it there. That is what political governance lacks. You tell us you are taking our taxes, bring your e-levy, bring this, bring that. You take about 20% of my salary, and my roads are still bad. And I go to the hospital and I use my national health card, and they're like, it doesn't cover this. Then at the end of the day, I'm like, why do you want more taxes?
Yeah.
So that becomes where the difference is. The church seems to be able to provide evidence of what it is using the monies of the people for. Of course, you're going to find the odd story where people
Definitely.
take money,
Yes.
but the majority of the cases, and the thing is, bad news travels fast. Bad news is sensational. So the bad ones are what we would hear, like, hey, this pastor is going to buy a jet and he's done this. But in most cases, what the church is using the meager resources for is wonderful. You would go there and look at the people in the church and be like, are these all the people? They are helping you put up this building. They are helping you fund the widows in the church. They are helping you buy taxis for the young men who don't have jobs and are going to drive. Like, it's among them. But the thing is, they see the evidence. And that's how the church has always moved through these things. That whenever, for example, in the spillage disaster, churches have decided, they did not necessarily raise another donation. They said that you have given us, and we are taking what you have given us to these people. And when I heard some of the amount, I was like, that's serious.
Yes.
Now, if churches did not do these things, political governments in Africa would suffer.
Exactly.
Because up until recently, almost every private clinic in Africa was by the church. Almost every private clinic in Africa until about a decade ago.
Okay.
Now, that tells you a lot. That, yes, the private clinics might not have been maybe as resourced as the teaching hospitals and all of that, but they were bringing health services to the vulnerable, helping them in certain ways. They were building mission schools. It's true, they are government funded, but they are still mission schools. They came in to teach, to convert people, but they were teaching people. That's another great thing the church is doing. You go up north and you look at the Catholic Relief Service, and forgive me if I'm not supposed to mention their name because they're not sponsoring the show and all of that, but I think they deserve notable mention. Because when you go up north and you look at the levels of poverty and you look at what the CRS is doing over there, you think, no, if these guys were not here, people would realize their governments are messing around. So the churches are really stepping in places where they can actually point out that there's crisis here. And they are saying, look, let's be the hands of God and help these people.
All right. So what do you think will be the future of leadership from the pulpit?
I think it would be in content-wise, it would be a lot of what the church has always said. It would be, you were dead in your trespasses, you are now alive in Christ, so live like this. Husbands, love your wives. Wives, submit to this. Sons, obey your parents. This, that. I think it will be a lot of that. But how exactly we would see it play out is where personally, I cannot predict. Because what the church has done very well is it has always looked at its context and the context that it lives in and responded to that context. Okay. That said that, okay, this is how we are supposed to respond to a crisis. Let us respond to it this way. So in the future, maybe in the coming days, because we are going to lean a lot on AI, we are going to see the church respond in certain ways that would say that, okay, let us still remember that human beings are humans and are not necessarily robots. So maybe when people are pushing for killing children with Down syndrome, the church is going to become more vocal in that regard and say that no, just because robots can do the job of human beings doesn't mean that human beings are. We will see a lot of that there. But content-wise, it's still going to be the same message that these people are using, the same message that human beings have inherent with. And because human beings have inherent with, they have to live this way. And the people who rule over them have to serve them in this way.
It's like, there was this issue about accountability, the people demanding more accountability.
Right.
How do you think the future of leadership from the pulpits will be as it pertains to accountability?
Well, it's interesting. Like you said, we can't predict, but I mean, it will definitely be more of whatever is happening right now. Like, people are demanding accountability, either the immediate members of the church, or outside the church are going to demand more accountability. But I think that what we are probably going to see more is the church trying to be more vocal. Right.
Okay.
We recently experienced the Pentecost Church organizing a whole event and bringing almost all the top leaders, political leaders of Ghana to the table to discuss. Yes. Right. That is what the Pentecost Church did. We've experienced Bernard Avle, being very vocal on what the church should mean for leadership and public service. In fact, on one of the points, he said that if we have just one Christian in a particular organization, that should be enough to actually influence, the right doing and all of that. So I probably think that the church is going to do more. It's going to come up more, going to be more vocal, just like the Pentecost Church did. I wouldn't be surprised if the other charismatic, churches pick up a similar trend to invite political leaders and say, look, come and let's talk. We might see more of that. We might see more Christians coming out publicly and saying that I want to go into politics. Different from, I was telling Phinehas earlier that there are some Christians who think that politics is a dirty game that they shouldn't go into. Probably we might see that change. And then there's going to be more of people demanding accountability from their leaders. And they're going to more and more align it to religion, because there's a debate out there to why about 60% of the cabinet members are Christians, or maybe even they are Muslims, and they are not implementing the values that they've been taught, even though the church has a limited time to teach all of these things, but we believe that they can actually still implement them in their leadership rules and whatever they do. So I think that the future is interesting, but there's a point that he made that is very interesting too. AI, is the church going to go by the flow or go with the flow, right? We know people are pushing for gay rights and all of that. Are we going to see Christian nations succumbing to this, or are they going to stand up to that? We know that our parliament is already standing up to that.
Nations, even Islamic nations,
right? Yeah. Islamic nations, and that is very interesting. Why people say America is a Christian nation, and yet, so it's going to be interesting how the church will respond to these pressures. Right? Are they going to be asked to do how the world is evolving, or they are even going to evolve? Ask the world to follow or whatever. But it promises to be an interesting future, and we as Christians will just continue to do what we're supposed to do till that kingdom come.
Okay. So we've been talking about leadership lessons that we can draw from the pulpits, and today we want to highlight a young leader, a young faith leader who happens to also be a guest. So that's Phinehas. We'll give you some time to talk to us about how you've been impacting other young faith leaders through your show.
Using the pulpit, actually.
Of course, yes, using the pulpit.
Oh yeah, it's a pulpit. It's a pulpit. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I would just say, and maybe it would actually be everything I want to say, but we should move past the stage of simply looking for Christians to take leadership positions, especially nominal Christians, people who are just habitual churchgoers.
Right.
Let us look for people who actually embody these values, the values that Christianity has held up high. Because once you find people who hold these values, that is where we will begin to see
I can't wait for that.
We would see that. We would see that. We would see that.
Yes.
Because in the Bible, we had politicians. And what set them apart was not simply because they were God's people, but simply because they acted in ways that made people notice them. Whether it was a Joseph or it was a Daniel, you realize that there were things about them, not just their faith, but the things they carried out that made them stand out. And these are some of the things that we want to point out on Faith and Reason, that we want to let people know that the things they are thinking about, the questions that are plaguing them about how relevant faith is to their practical lives, have very logical answers in Christianity, that the Bible answers them, that young people should not be afraid to say they are Christians when they get to universities. They should not think that when they receive political appointments or they become a father or they are working, mid-management level in a company, that their faith doesn't matter, that there are going to be very relevant ways for them to live out their faith. And that really is all that Faith and Reason is about, that, hey, there are worldviews out there, but don't check the Christian worldview.
Okay, so I'll let you catch your breath and then give us your final words. Baslai will start with that's your final words.
Final words. I think I need more of this. This conversation. I hope that there will be a part 2 to throw more light, to expand and to expatiate on some of these things, because I think it's a topic that many people out there are probably very interested in. And I'm sure people are actually very interested in how the Bible is still very relevant to solving some of these practical issues like Phinehas is doing on Faith and Reason. They want to know more, right? So, with my final words, I must say that maybe we should do this again. And I would throw the challenge to all Christians, Muslims out there that, look, the world expects a lot from us, leveraging on our faiths, because we all profess that our faith is supposed to show the world the way, be the light. So if we are the light, then we need to indeed be the light.
If we are the light, we must be the light indeed. Phinehas, final words.
So I'd say that based on our share numbers, we should let people see the impact of our faith. We need to stop compartmentalizing our lives. Let people see you as a Muslim, if you are. Let people see you as the Christian that you are. Go out there and live out the faith. We look a lot at political governance, but remember that you are a leader yourself.
Yep.
And if you're a leader yourself, then in whatever circle you find, you should be able to impact the circle you find yourself. And once we do that, on a multiplied scale, we'll begin to see very serious change.
Yes.
Okay, so gentlemen, thank you so much for coming and accepting the invitation and making this discussion worthwhile. That somebody's even asking for part 2. We'll look at that definitely. So today we've been looking at leadership lessons that we can draw from the pulpit. And as you noticed, it was a very heated discussion at some point. And then indeed, they also gave us a lot of fresh perspective, and I'm sure you would agree it was uniquely challenging. So would like to thank you all for following us. Continue to subscribe, share, and then watch out for the next episode. Bye.